He's the best midfielder in the world at the moment.
The football season is in full swing on BBC Sounds.
They've still got their best football to play, which is huge.
With everything to play for in the Premier League and Champions League.
It's an enormous win that will give them hope.
Hear the latest news, insight and analysis with Football Daily.
We want to see emotions, we want to see players that care.
If they can get momentum going in the league, they can take that into both competitions.
And listen to games as they happen on BBC Radio 5 Live.
What an incredible game.
Listen on BBC Sounds.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Alasdair Lamont. This is the Scottish Football Podcast, bringing you all the news, views and analysis you need about the national game. It's Wednesday the 6th of March, and coming up today...
Scotland need to get there. They're probably, one of the favourites in that group to get there. I think it would be a massive disappointment if they didn't get to Euro 2025.
Following yesterday's draw, can the SWNT emulate the men's team and qualify for the Euros? Not for the first time, there was drama in the Championship.
At this stage of the season, it's an old cliche, isn't it? But, the results are far more important than the performance, and that was the case tonight.
What did last night's results mean for the title race? And
he's going to his pocket, Don Robertson, and it's going to be a red card for Hyun-Jin Yang, and that is a massive moment in this game.
Were the SFA right to reject Celtic's appeal against Yang's red card?
This is the Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sport Scotland.
I'm joined this morning by Ian McCall, manager of Clyde, and the former Scotland midfielder Suzanne Lappin. How are you both this morning?
Morning, Al. Fine.
Excellent stuff. Well, as ever, tons to get through. Before we kick off, though, let's run through the latest Scottish football headlines. Scotland have been drawn in a group with Serbia, Slovakia and Israel in qualifying for Women's Euro 2025, with the top three sides from the group progressing to the playoff stage. Dundee United moved 4 points clear of Raith Rovers at the top of the Championship with a 1-0 win away at Morton last night. Airdrie won 2-0 at Dunfermline to close the gap on the Greenock side in fourth. In League 1, Falkirk beat Cove Rangers 1-0, while in League 2, Bonnyrigg Rose and Spartans drew 2-2, and Stranraer demolished Dumbarton 5-0. And Celtic have had their bid to overturn Yang's controversial red card against Hearts rejected by the SFA. The South Korean winger will now serve a 2-game ban. Well, let's just kick off with that last story. Come to you first. What do you make of the SFA rejecting that appeal? Any surprises that they did so?
There's absolutely no surprise that they rejected the appeal, I don't think, because I think Celtic and a lot of the people who work in the media were so vociferous about how bad a mistake it was. I didn't think of the sending off, but I did think it was a 50-50 call. But I do think Yang was... he wasn't deliberately endangering an opponent. As everybody said, he was trying to lift the ball over the defender's head. But I could see why it was a red. In my view was it wasn't a red. I think a yellow card for the game would have sufficed. But I didn't think it was a great shot that it wasn't overturned, just for the very reason that, for me anyway, it was a 50-50 call.
We don't see many of these decisions being overturned on appeal, do we, Suzanne? What have you made generally of the situation? Celtic have said that they've written to the SFA not only for the appeal but to express serious concerns about the standard of officiating during that game. Are they right to do that?
There was obviously, a lot of calls in that game using VAR. And I think, my personal view is that the only one of them was correct, was the offside for Shankland. I don't think Celtic's was a penalty. I didn't think it was a red card. And, Hearts is definitely not a penalty. So... Yeah. That game itself, the moments, the VAR moments, were a decisive factor in how that game unfolded. Given a lot of it happened in the early part of the game, but I like Ian. I can understand the red card in the sense of as a hybrid, as a 50-50, as a player, a former player, would I expect that to be a red card? Absolutely not. No. But where we are today and everything being looked at, and the still images, which on everything make it worse than the reality. I think that's the way football is now, and players have almost got to think twice on their natural instinct to in terms of what they're being penalised for.
Lewis Mayo's red card was rejected as well, and Kilmarnock's boss Derek McInnes was also giving his thoughts on VAR, saying that the inconsistency is driving us all mad. Ian, I guess you'll probably be quite pleased that at your level that it's not involved, but is it as a spectator, almost as a fan watching the top level games with VAR? Is Derek McInnes right in that regard?
Well, yeah, I think so. But I've got to say the one thing I'd say, and I hate calling the Championship lower league, but certainly League One and League Two, I would suggest are the lower leagues. But there's times in games when we would like VAR to be there. Myself recently, we played Peterhead in the 95th minute. That we were given a penalty against us for Peterhead to draw 1-1. And we've since seen the video and the referee's seen it, and it was just never a penalty. So if it had been VAR, if VAR had been there on this occasion, there's no penalty. Well, I wouldn't have thought there'd be any penalty given because it was so obvious. How crucial that 2 points is going to be to us at the end of the season, who knows? But yeah, I mean, when I left Martin Thistle last season, I went to a few games. My first one was at Motherwell playing Kilmarnock, I think, when Van Veen was in his pomp. And there was a VAR stoppage that day. It was my first experience of it. But it was literally for 6 minutes for not very much. So, in fact, these things are happening, week in, week out, and it's taking such a long time for relatively simple decisions. I think it must be a nightmare for managers, for coaches, but most importantly for supporters. It's just it's turning it really dull. If they got the vast majority of the decisions right, then great. But they don't seem to. I mean, the one big one for me in the Hearts game, I mean, the penalty that Hearts got, I mean, that was ludicrous. I mean, utterly ludicrous. How you could, and you feel for the rest, because when they get called to the screen, they're under pressure. There's not many people when they get called to the screen stick to the same decision. So I can see why Derek and a lot of the guys managing the SPN at Premier League are getting frustrated by it. But if they get a last minute penalty that wins them 3 points because of VAR, they wouldn't be as frustrated, I don't think.
For everything you need to know about your team this season, download the BBC Sport app. All the latest news, goal updates, stats and scores, and insight and analysis. Just select your club to get the biggest stories and best content at your fingertips. What a result. Download the BBC Sport app for everything you need to know about your team this season.
On to that Euro 2025 draw. Scotland's drawn in a group with Serbia, Slovakia and Israel. Suzanne, are you relatively pleased with that draw?
Yeah, I think you've got to be. Obviously the teams themselves all pose different threats, but I think when you stand back from it, as a former Scotland player and having been involved in the setup, for a number of years, I think the draw is, particularly what you're saying about getting to the playoffs in terms of the top three. In my eyes, Scotland need to get there. They're probably, one of the favourites in that group to get there. I think it would be a massive disappointment if they didn't get to Euro 2025. Obviously the success of Euro 2017 getting there, then followed up by the World Cup in 2019, and we're now at the point of nearly 6 years of, not getting to a major tournament, which kind of goes against the investment and, the way the women's game is growing here in Scotland, particularly over that period that, I think the talent we've got, in the team, they've certainly got to be aiming for qualification.
Yeah, I mean, they do go into this campaign out of sorts slightly. Obviously, the Pinatar Cup most recently, they lost out on penalties, which can happen to anyone, but the Nations League campaign wasn't a great one. Pedro Martinez Losa, from his point of view, absolutely must qualify for this, surely.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think the run of results of late have not been good enough. Appreciating the Nations League, very tough group with England and Belgium and Netherlands, but that's where Scotland were a few years ago, that, we were at least taking points off these teams, to not win any of those games. And then in the Pinatar Cup as well, appreciate, like yourself, penalties, it can go either way, but Scotland versus Finland, Scotland were beating Finland, only 2-3 years ago, and, we really need to be at that level, for our ranking position, and, how we progress, particularly through that sort of 2019 period. It just feels, slightly as if we've fell short over the last couple of years. And as I say, for the wealth of talent, particularly young talent, coming through, and the standard of the league itself here now in Scotland, which has moved on massively, we really need to be qualifying for these major tournaments.
Just finally, what do you think has happened in that period then, where, as you say, 2017, 2019, it was amazing to be part of even just the commentary team and stuff like that, going to these major events. Why has it dropped off, do you think? I know we lost Kim Little, which I always think is a major factor, because she's such a world-class player. But beyond, is there anything beyond the simple loss of one player that has happened that's caused that kind of drop off, do you think?
It's hard to say, because as I say, the talent there and the standards that they're playing within now is, it's almost like, night and day, in terms of, the level of support, etc. around it. It's difficult to say. Kim was a huge loss, she really was. She was the standard setter within that team. They have went through a lot of transition, a lot of young players coming in, and maybe, only at like sort of 7 to 10 caps in their name. So they are fairly new. But, we've just not really made a major scalp or had a big result, in so long, which is, as I say, it's just difficult to see why that is. I think, it's fair to say that, the manager will be under a lot of pressure to qualify for Euro 2025.
You're listening to the Scottish Football Podcast.
Let's move on to the Championship. Two big games last night, Dunfermline, Airdrie and Morton Dundee United. Ian, back to you. We'll start at Capello. Dundee United beating Morton 1-0. That could be a massive result, couldn't it?
It is a huge result. I know Morton were beaten here on Saturday, but they were previously in an incredibly impressive run. I don't know the finance involved in bringing Louis Moult, but for that type of goal, for that type of 3 points, it's worth it. It's worth every penny. A player who's comfortably can play top level Premier League, but that winner, and I think he's in a rich vein of form just now, is absolutely priceless. I think it makes this Saturday, I know we're going to go on and talk about it probably, when the D&I will get a game they expect to win at home to Arbroath and Rayther in a Fife derby, that could be pivotal in terms of the Championship race. But a huge result and a poor result for Morton. They got themselves right back into the mix, and now the 2 home defeats. But Dougie I'd imagine he will sort that out. But that could be a pivotal moment for me anyway in the Championship title race this season.
Also a great result for Airdrie, winning 2-0 away at Dunfermline. They're certainly putting the pressure on Morton for that probably final playoff spot. How impressed have you been generally with them under Rhys McCabe?
Yeah, I mean, as we were talking off air, we train out there, so I've watched them train a couple of times. I don't know Rhys McCabe, I know a few of the boys, but I think he's one of these young guys that's got a chance. I've got to say, he looks, for somebody so young, he looks very composed and very strong in his beliefs and how he wants to play, etc., etc. No matter what they say back, they stay the same. Great result for them. Dunfermline had started to turn the corner. I've got to say, I think third place now. I thought Thistle were nailed on for third place, but I really think they need a win on Saturday, because I think Airdrie and one or two of the others are really coming strong now. Obviously including Morton for that top 4. I think the top 2 are nailed on. But yeah, a terrific result. I mean, that's in the last month. Airdrie have went to Tannadice and went to East End Park. Big grounds, or big clubs, and won both games. So all credit to them. Yeah, well, as Ian was alluding to, they would normally look ahead to the weekend's Championship fixtures on a Thursday, but instead we're going to have a special preview of Rangers Benfica tomorrow. So let's just address all the Championship issues just now. You mentioned the Fife derby, which is probably the game of the weekend, if you like, in the Championship.
Raith Rovers, I mean, I was up at Arbroath last Friday, and how they threw that one away, I'll never know. But how do you see that derby going?
It depends how much that result affect them. They must have been in shock after that game. I mean, listen, I don't want to do Arbroath down, or the whole credit to them, but they were dead and buried. 2-0, it could have been 3, 4, 5-0. It was just astonishing. I watched it on the BBC, obviously, on Friday night there, and I wasn't there, but I presume it looked like it was a rather typical Arbroath night with the wind and the rain, etc., etc. So, yeah, I mean, it was a really, really poor second half from Raith. But even early in the second half, they could have scored to go 3-0 up. So a huge result for Arbroath. Still think it'll be really, really difficult for them. You couldn't call this. I mean, Raith have been really, really dominant in the Fife Derby this season. As all of the family fans call them the wee team. So you really, really couldn't call this one. I don't think. I certainly think that then they'll take something from the game, which makes the result at Tannadice even more important in terms of that gap there starting to grow.
Sure. Suzanne, in terms of Dundee United, I think obviously they were everyone's favourites to go up. They just opened up that little gap now. And you would expect them to have enough to go and beat Arbroath at home, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think so. I think looking at the fixtures at the weekend, as Ian said, everybody probably expects Dundee United to run out comfortable winners. And obviously last night's result was a huge result. A really, really good goal. At Morton, which is tough for anyone. And I think that one at the weekend, the Raith Dunfermline, is going to be a tight game, and Raith will be trying to do all they can to get the points there.
Ian, tough one for Thistle away to Queen's Park, who are going well under Callum Davis, and it looks like he's really gone in there and made a difference already, hasn't he?
I think he's made 2 or 3 shiningly experienced player, ex-Thistle stalwart Welsh, who's had he should have nightmare time with injury, but he's a terrific player. I think he did really well at Thistle when he was there. So I just sense that's a really big game for Thistle, because I don't think they've won in 6, and I thought, you look at the league table, as Colin says, that the top 3 were nailed on. I thought Thistle were nailed on for 3rd, but there's 2 or 3 teams now starting to come out of the pack, and I think Thistle just need that win to make it comfortable. Brian Graham in such good form, so they should have enough, but a draw or a defeat for Thistle, then that 3rd place is looking a little bit shaky, so that's a big game for them.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, Inverness, Cally Thistle, they could do a win at home to Airdrie, but Airdrie going really well. What about your Clyde side, Ian, before we wrap up? Away at Forfar after a couple of wins in a row. I mean, you've got a wee bit of momentum there. Can you climb off the bottom, do you think?
Well, listen, we're going to try, aren't we? I mean, somebody sent me a form table of the last 6 games, and we're top of it, but unfortunately Forfar are second top, so 2 form teams in the league, so I'm looking forward to getting up there. I've got a lot of friends up there. Dave McGregor's one of the best men in Scottish football. I don't even know what he does now. He probably still makes the Fridays. Looking forward to it. I mean, if we can win 3 in a row, at any level of football, winning 3 football matches in a row is really good. So that's what we're aiming for.
Well, we wish you well for that one. That's all we've got time for. My thanks to Ian McCall and Suzanne Lappin, and thank you for listening. Liam McLeod and Stephen Thompson will be back with you tomorrow morning with a special preview of Rangers Europa League last 16 tie with Benfica. They're out in Lisbon. Remember, we publish new episodes every weekday morning, so you can get your daily dose of Scottish football bright and early. If you haven't done so already, just follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Bye for now.
The Scotland Rugby Podcast is now available every Tuesday. Join me, Andy Burke and Tom English. Just head to BBC Sounds and subscribe to the Scotland Rugby Podcast.
It's just seismic stuff.
There's bucket hats as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is this a rugby podcast or is this a fashion podcast?
Why can't it be a bit of both?
Rugby. Let's get on to rugby.
There's a lot to be excited about.
Today's guest, John McGuigan.
Clubs are at an absolute bedrock of everything Scottish rugby's about.
The Rugby Sports Sound Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
You cannot help but be so excited.
It's going to be the centre of the rugby universe.
BBC Sounds.